ancient world had many kings, but none cast a shadow as brutal, unpredictable, and feared as Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't just conquer, he crushed, humiliated, and burned until nothing remained. Cities fell, nations vanished, prophecies ignited, and a single king rose from the smoke, more terrifying than any empire he destroyed. This is the fall the world never recovered from. Before we go deeper into Nebuchadnezzar's destruction, thank you for staying with the story this far. Your time means everything to this channel. If this journey is gripping you, the history, the tension, the rise and fall of empires, tap like. It takes a second, but it pushes this documentary to more viewers just like you. And if you want more powerful cinematic history told this way, subscribe. It helps us create more stories that deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching. Now, let's return to the fall of Jerusalem. Before Nebuchadnezzar carved his name into history, the world he would soon dominate was already collapsing. Assyria, once unstoppable, was dying. Egypt was desperate, and the lands between them were choking under fear, superstition, and war. Every kingdom was fragile, every border was bleeding, every prophecy warned the same thing: a new destroyer was coming. But no one knew his name yet. No one knew a young warrior prince was rising from the dust of Babylon, a city rebuilding itself, brick by blood-stained brick, waiting for the man who would turn it into the terror of the world. Before the world feared him, Nebuchadnezzar was forged in a battlefield no child should have survived. He grew up watching empires collapse, learning one lesson over and over again: only the ruthless live long enough to rule. As a young prince, he marched beside his father into dying Assyrian cities, where streets were lined with smoke, broken walls, and the bodies of kings who thought their thrones were eternal. Every victory carved something into him. Every corpse taught him another truth about power. And every burning city showed him exactly what fear could accomplish. By the time he became commander of Babylon's armies, he was no longer just a prince. He was a weapon waiting to be unleashed. His rise exploded at the Battle of Carchemish, where Egypt and the remnants of Assyria gathered to reclaim their glory. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't just defeat them, he erased them. The battle didn't end in triumph, it ended in silence. The kind of silence that comes when an empire realizes its last breath has been taken. News of the young prince spread like wildfire, a conqueror with no hesitation, a warrior who moved like he was born for destruction, a leader who believed the gods were sharpening him for something greater. Then came the moment that changed everything. When his father died unexpectedly, Nebuchadnezzar raced back to Babylon, not out of grief, but out of instinct. His throne was waiting. His destiny was calling. And the world was about to meet the king it would never forget. Because from the moment he took the crown, Nebuchadnezzar ruled with one belief: fear builds empires faster than love. While Nebuchadnezzar was tightening his grip on the world, one small kingdom stood directly in his path: Judah, a fragile land caught between collapsing empires, ruled by kings who feared politics more than prophecy, and driven by a pride they could no longer afford. Judah should have bowed, it should have surrendered, but instead, its rulers convinced themselves that Egypt would save them, that Babylon wouldn't return, that their walls, their alliances, and their traditions could protect them from the storm gathering in the east. They were wrong. When Nebuchadnezzar marched toward Jerusalem for the first time, he didn't come in fury. He came in warning. a silent reminder of what happened to nations who resisted him. He took treasures from the temple, young nobles from the city, and the loyalty Judah promised, but never intended to keep. Instead of humility, Judah chose defiance. Instead of repentance, it chose rebellion. And Nebuchadnezzar saw it all. To him, Judah wasn't a nation, it was a spark that, if left burning, could ignite resistance across his entire empire. And Nebuchadnezzar didn't tolerate sparks. He crushed them. But Judah's kings didn't understand the danger. Every rebellion, every secret alliance, every whisper of independence reached the ears of Babylon. And each act of defiance pushed Nebuchadnezzar one step closer to returning, not as a warning this time, but as judgment. The king who had already erased empires would now turn his full attention to Jerusalem, and the fall that was coming would make the first siege look merciful. Judah didn't learn. After the first siege, after the humiliation, after watching their nobles dragged away in chains, they still believed Babylon wouldn't return. But Nebuchadnezzar was watching. And when Judah rebelled again, he didn't hesitate. He moved with the precision of a man who had conquered too many kingdoms to tolerate disobedience twice. This time, Babylon didn't come to intimidate, it came to break. Nebuchadnezzar's armies swept across Judah like a dark tide, taking cities, seizing captives, stripping the land of soldiers, craftsmen, leaders, leaving behind only the poor, the weak, and the afraid. Tens of thousands were marched toward Babylon, swallowed by the empire they had dared to defy. Among them were priests, nobles, warriors, and a young man whose name would echo through centuries, Ezekiel. His visions of judgment were not metaphors. They were reports from a kingdom collapsing under the weight of its own rebellion. But even after this second blow, a blow that should have shattered Judah's pride, the nation still refused to fall to its knees. Nebuchadnezzar placed Zedekiah on the throne, a king who owed his crown to Babylon, and yet somehow convinced himself he could betray the empire that kept him alive. This wasn't rebellion anymore. This was suicide. To Nebuchadnezzar, Judah's defiance was no longer political. It was personal, an insult to his power, a challenge to his authority, a spark that still refused to die. And there was only one way to deal with the spark that kept returning to life: smother it completely. The next time Nebuchadnezzar marched toward Jerusalem, he would not come to punish. He would come to erase. The final siege was about to begin, and this time, Babylon would not leave anything standing. The final siege, Jerusalem's last breath. When Nebuchadnezzar returned for the third time, he didn't come as a king. He came as a storm. Babylon surrounded Jerusalem with walls of soldiers, siege towers, iron and flame. No one escaped, no food entered, no hope remained. The siege dragged on for almost 2 years, and inside the city, life began to unravel. Bread disappeared, water ran dry. Famine hollowed the streets, turning strong men into shadows and children into whispers of what they once were. Jerusalem didn't fall overnight. It rotted. Mothers searched for scraps. Fathers watched their families starve. Soldiers too weak to lift swords leaned against the walls they once promised to defend. The city prayed for deliverance, but none came. And Nebuchadnezzar waited, patiently, coldly, because he knew what starvation would do long before his armies touched the gates. When the walls finally cracked, Babylon poured in like fire through dry grass. Streets turned into battlegrounds. Homes collapsed under torches and chaos. The last defenders were swept away in minutes, their resistance crushed under the weight of an empire that had already decided their fate. King Zedekiah fled through a hidden passage, but Babylon's soldiers hunted him down across the plains. He was captured, brought before Nebuchadnezzar, and forced to watch his sons executed before his eyes, the final image he would ever see before the king ordered his eyes torn out. Jerusalem's judgment was complete. Babylon set the city on fire, the palace burned, the walls fell, and the temple, the heart of Israel's faith, the symbol of God's presence, was reduced to ash under Nebuchadnezzar's command. The sacred vessels were carried away, the ark disappeared, and the survivors were chained and dragged into exile, leaving behind a city that no longer existed. Jerusalem didn't just fall, it ceased to be. The smoke rose for days, the screams faded into silence, and Nebuchadnezzar stood over the ruins, a king who had finally extinguished the spark that refused to die. But in that moment of total destruction, something else began to rise, something neither Nebuchadnezzar nor Babylon could stop. When the fires of Jerusalem finally died, the silence that followed was heavier than the smoke. What Babylon didn't burn, it carried away. The survivors, starving, broken, and wrapped in ash, were shackled together and forced onto the long road east. Behind them, the city of David lay in ruins. Before them stood the empire of the man who destroyed it. The march to Babylon wasn't a journey. It was a funeral procession, and everyone in it knew exactly what had died. Mothers walked without their children. Soldiers walked without their honor. Priests walked without a temple. And an entire nation walked without a home. When they reached Babylon, the scale of Nebuchadnezzar's world became unmistakable. Towering walls, gates carved with lions and dragons, streets lined with soldiers, scribes, merchants, a city overflowing with life and power. To the exiles, it felt like stepping into a world that had swallowed their own. Nebuchadnezzar scattered them across the empire, farmers here, craftsmen there, nobles pressed into forced service. This wasn't mercy. It was strategy. A broken nation could not rebel. A scattered people could not rise. And a homeland in ashes could not offer hope. But even in Babylon, even in chains, something stirred among the captives. Whispers, memories, prophecies they thought were dead. Men like Ezekiel began speaking of visions, not of doom, but of a God who had not abandoned them, a God who moved even in foreign lands, a God who promised that destruction was not the final chapter. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't see those whispers. He saw only victory, a city erased, a people conquered, and a king humbled before the world. What he didn't know was that empires fall the same way cities burn, slowly at first, then all at once. And while Jerusalem lay in ashes, the seeds of Babylon's own downfall were already beginning to grow. For years, Nebuchadnezzar ruled like a man carved out of iron. Empires bowed, cities burned, and fear itself seemed to march at his side. But the same fire that made him unstoppable was the fire that began to consume him. It started quietly. A dream he couldn't shake, a vision he couldn't silence, a warning he refused to understand. Nebuchadnezzar had seen prophecies before, kings falling, kingdoms collapsing, empires rising only to disappear like dust. But this dream was different. It didn't speak of nations, it spoke of him, a colossal statue, a shattering stone, a kingdom broken into pieces, a throne ripped away. He demanded answers from every priest, every magician, every wise man in his empire, but no one could calm the shadow twisting through his mind. Power had made Nebuchadnezzar invincible. But now, power began to make him paranoid. He built statues of gold as if trying to freeze his legacy in metal. He forced entire nations to bow, trying to silence the unease crawling through his thoughts. He stretched Babylon higher, wider, brighter. Walls, temples, gates, gardens, as if building a kingdom big enough to hide the fear he refused to name. But no city, no army, no monument could bury what was coming. Nebuchadnezzar's mind began to fracture. He raged at counselors. He lost nights to terrors he couldn't remember. He drifted through his palace like a man haunted by something no one else could see. Until finally, the king who once shattered Jerusalem shattered himself. The chronicles describe a fall so sudden it stunned an empire. Nebuchadnezzar vanished from the throne, wandering the wilderness like a wild animal, unwashed, unrecognizable, consumed by madness so deep that even Babylon's greatest healers could not touch it. The most powerful man in the world, reduced to a creature crawling through fields, living on grass, drenched in dew, broken by the very God he thought he had conquered. Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed nations, temples, kings, and kingdoms. But in the end, the only throne he could not hold was his own mind. When Nebuchadnezzar finally returned from the edge of madness, the world that once trembled before him had changed. His empire still stood, his monuments still towered, but the man behind them was no longer the iron ruler he once was. His enemies were gone, his conquests complete, and the throne he fought so fiercely to claim now felt colder than ever. He had burned cities into ash, scattered nations across deserts, and carved his name into history with blood and fire. Yet none of it had protected him from the collapse of his own mind. Babylon, in all its splendor, was his masterpiece. Its walls stretched wide enough to swallow armies. Its gates shone like the rising sun, and its hanging gardens, if they truly existed, were built not for glory, but to prove that even nature could be bent to his will. But history has a cruel memory. For all the cities he built, the world remembers the ones he destroyed. For all the order he brought to Babylon, the world remembers the chaos he unleashed on Judah. For all the temples he restored, the world remembers the one he burned. His legacy is a paradox, a king praised as a savior by his own people and cursed as a nightmare by those he conquered. A ruler who rebuilt the greatest city of the ancient world and tore another to pieces. A man who commanded nations but could not command his own heartbeat, his own dreams, his own mind. In the end, Nebuchadnezzar died as all kings do, quietly, in the shadow of the empire he forged through fear. Babylon continued without him, but not for long. Within a generation, it fell to another conqueror, another prophecy, another shift of power its mighty walls couldn't stop. Nebuchadnezzar believed his glory would last forever. Instead, it became a warning that no empire is eternal, no throne is unshakable, no king is immune to the weight of the power he wields. The smoke that rose from Jerusalem may have faded, but the shadow of the king who lit that fire still stretches across history, a reminder of how far ambition can rise and how far madness can drag it down.